Welcome back
Welcome.
to another episode of Rewind, Rewatch. I am Joel,
And I am Andrene.
and we are back with another 90s film to review and
I'm so
determine
excited.
the rewatch value. She's so excited
I'm so excited.
she was able to pick the movie this week. And for this week, we picked
Scream from 1996.
the first Scream.
Yes,
The best Scream?
original. The best. The original.
How many of the Screams have you seen?
All
there's
of them.
What is there, like 10 of them now?
Yeah.
I haven't even... Oh. I haven't even been able to keep track of all the
The
different
last
Scream
one was
movies.
like on a subway in New York, which it actually wasn't that bad. I didn't watch it in theaters, to be very clear. I watched it on Amazon Prime, but
Still counts. The new theater.
yeah, it was fun. It was pretty good. It was pretty good.
I think I only saw the first three. I remember really enjoying the first one, and I liked the second one too. I feel like the third one, I was kind of like, this is starting to get stupid. And then
Yeah, the
I
motive
kinda-
was kind of, and the third one was kind of a reach. I don't even remember exactly what it was, but I remember just being like, "This is
Yeah,
not."
I remember feeling like this was kind of a waste of time, and then I just kind of fell off from watching the rest of them after that. Did it get better?
In the middle there, it got really like 4 or 5. It got really like, what are we doing here?
That's a shame.
But I will say the last two that came out. So the one before the New York City one kind of brought it all back together. I really liked how they talked about how the stab movies, quote unquote, got really corny, moving on, and they reinvented it. So
Well, it's interesting that you brought that up because I feel like the first thing when I think about Scream and even rewatching it this week in preparation for the pod, I think what makes this movie, because you love horror movies,
oh, okay.
right? So like
Do
we have to
I?
give the context.
Yeah, so here's the thing about me, people. I love horror and psychological thrillers so much that I fall asleep to them on a regular basis.
True weirdo. Like she's a true
So
psychopath.
to get okay.
A true psychopath.
Okay. So to get to pick a horror movie, although it was a horror comedy, to be fair,
Fair.
I was really excited about this week because this is just the embodiment of what brings me joy.
And I'm not really a horror guy. Most of the times, if I watch a horror movie, it's because I'm at Andrene's house and
Yeah.
she's like, "Let's watch a horror movie." But the point that I was making is that I feel like with this movie, it always stood out to me a bit differently than other horror movies because
genius?
it's incredibly meta. It's a horror movie about horror movies,
Right. Exactly.
and I think the first time I saw it, that was what kind of intrigued me in the first place. Was like, oh, this movie's like interesting. Like the way that they put it together, it's very much like a movie that's talking about itself.
Exactly.
And I think rewatching it, it stands out even more. Like all of the references, even from the first scene, of just
Yes.
like constantly referring to other horror movies, where the movie itself is like almost more of an homage than it is even a horror movie.
Not to mention the twist when it came to the killer.
Of course,
I mean, just the ultimate reveal there.
yeah.
I mean, at this point, if you haven't watched Scream, I mean, what are you doing? Just press pause, go back and watch it, and come back because there will be a number of spoilers.
And that's the thing with this podcast in general. I feel like it's one of those things where you can either, I mean, we want you to listen to every episode, obviously, but if you haven't seen any of these movies, you know, it's up to you if you want to listen to the episode before you rewatch it to kind of contextualize things, or maybe you want to watch the movie first and then come back to the episode. You'll come in with a little bit more of your own context before you hear us blabber about it for the next hour. Scream. Well, yeah, let's get into it because right out the gate,
Well, let's back it up a little bit and talk about who our stars are. shall we?
well, yeah,
Yeah, so-
right out the gate,
So we have Neve Campbell, who plays Sidney Prescott.
and she's in all.
She's in
six
all.
of them.
She's in
What is
all
it
of the
now?
screens.
7?
Oh, so I've heard they're trying to make another one, but apparently she doesn't want to be in it, and so
She's over it. She's like, I'm 65.
So
I'm not Jamie Lee Curtis.
I'm
I'm
about
not,
to say Jamie Lee
I'm
Curtis.
not gonna be running away from the bad guy at 70. Enough is enough.
So I'm not sure if the will even happen at this point. But anyway, so you have Neve Campbell, you have Courtney Cox, who plays Gail Weathers, who's the reporter. You have Skeet Ulrich, who plays Billy Loomis.
Skeet Ulrich is funny. Number one, because his name's Skeet. And number two, I always remember in the 90s, and can't even think of anything else he was in other than this movie, but I remember thinking that he was like a poor man's Johnny Depp. Like
Yeah.
gave me very
Yeah.
much like what was that movie that he did back in the 80s? Like there was a movie where he was kind of like a high school kid where he like wore a leather jacket and he was like one of those weird misunderstood high school kids. Um and I feel like Skeet Ulrich was kind of playing off of that. Like he was kind of giving his own Johnny Depp impression. I don't know if that was intentional or if they just looked alike, but I remember thinking like, "Oh, he's the Johnny Depp prototype." But then we kind of never saw much from him after this
Yeah.
movie.
I don't really recall seeing him in anything. It could be that I just kind of missed the things that he was in. But yeah, I know he was in The Craft, which is a movie that I used to really, really enjoy. He played one of these boys that eventually became well. They threw a hex on him, and he ended up like harassing one of the girls. It's not a big deal, but I do remember for him from the Craft, and I think he was like an extra in like Weekend at Bernie's or something. But
What?
yeah,
Wow, my favorite 90s movie.
that
I'm thinking of this movie called Cry Baby, which I actually have never seen. And apparently Ricky Lake is also in this movie,
oh Lord,
which is like set in the 50s and he kind of looks like a greaser. But I don't know. The face that Johnny Depp is giving on this poster is very much giving me Skeet.
giving me ski. Okay, moving right along. So next we have David Arquette, and he plays Deputy Dewey.
Deputy Dewey.
And basically, he is Neve Campbell's best friend's brother in this movie. So the best friend is played by what is her name again? Rose McGowan.
Rose McGowan.
She plays Tatum.
And that was a girl. She was in Jawbreaker.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what I remember her from.
And then Matthew Lillard plays Stu. And a little like surprise here, we have Henry Winkler who plays the principal.
Yo, it's so funny because I forgot he was in this movie.
Same.
And then as soon as he showed up, I was like, oh, yeah, I remember the Winkler scene.
Yeah, exactly.
It all came back to me.
Exactly.
Can we talk a little bit about...
Drew Barrymore?
Well, yes.
Because
but
we need to talk about her.
We'll talk about Drew Barrymore, but I was thinking about David Arquette.
Okay.
And specifically the fact that he, in this film, is supposed to be a 25-year-old deputy. I don't know how convincing he is as a 25-year-old. He's supposed to be, like, significantly younger than Courtney Cox, but I'm pretty sure they're the same age. And it required a lot of, like, suspended disbelief for me to buy that he was supposed to be, like, this young, impressionable kid that he's like has this crush on the woman who's on the news and she's older and experienced and you're kind of like, is she taking advantage of him or does she actually like him? And he has that line about like, ma'am, I'm 25. I was 24 for a whole year. I'm in your demographic. Which is like, bro, like you're clearly a 37-year-old man. This is ridiculous.
Well, speaking of age, it's kind of all like that, right? Because
I was going to bring up Neve Campbell. Well.
So Neve Campbell is playing a 17-year-old high school student, and she was actually 23 at the time.
I thought she was 25. She would have been a more convincing deputy
playing 17. So the character who played her dad was 36. Just think about that for a second. So her father was 36 and she was 23 playing a 17-year-old. So like in this movie, we all know they're way older than whatever roles that they're actually playing.
Way older. Even Matthew Lillard, like none of them looked like high school kids.
But it's just, it was what it was.
Right.
Okay. So now we got the ages out of the way. Can we move on to Drew Barrymore?
We can move on to Drew Barrymore.
Okay. I have so much to say about her. Okay. First off, let's start about the fact that in the opening scene, you see her, and this is kind of where the whole Scream movie, do you like scary movies? Do you want to play a game? Starts out. The phone rings. I mean, this movie just starts right away. The phone rings. She picks it up, and it's this voice saying like, hi. Oh, sorry, wrong number. And he calls back, and then it's like, do you like scary movies? And she's like, yeah. And he starts talking about like her favorite scary movies, and they're having this whole conversation. And she quickly realizes this guy is a creep. Because at some point he says, I want to know your name. And she's like, why? Why do you want to know? She's still kind of like flirting with him. Like there's this mysterious guy on the phone talking about horror movies. And he's like, I want to know who I'm looking at. And she's like, what did you just say? And he's like, I want to know who I'm talking to. That's not what you said, right? So now we're invested. We're like, oh, who is this guy? He's looking at her. Where is he? And as the scene progresses, it's like this guy is basically, we see that he's stalking her, and he says, let's play a game, essentially, for your life and your boyfriend's life, because he has the boyfriend
Tied up on the patio.
So now
Steve.
the trivia,
Of course. Every high school boyfriend's name is Steve.
but if you notice, which is kind of shady, when he first asks her if she has a boyfriend, she says no.
Mm-hmm.
But then as soon as it's danger, my boyfriend's big and he plays football and he'll kick your ass. It's like, now you got a man?
Now you got a man. Yeah.
But anyway, so basically the trivia is they're all questions about horror movies. So it starts off pretty easy. I believe it was like about like Halloween was the first question.
Establishing the meta like right away.
Right.
Like
right.
this is what we're gonna be doing here.
And then in the second question is basically like, who was the killer in Friday the 13th? And she's like, oh, Jason. And again, like when you're watching it, you're thinking like, oh, she's right.
Listen, it was Jason. I saw that movie 20 goddamn times.
Then you should know Jason's mother, Mrs. Voorhees, was the original killer. Jason didn't show up until the sequel. I'm afraid that was a wrong answer.
You tricked me.
She said, hey, you tricked me.
It's like, yeah, I'm trying to murder you and your boyfriend. Yes, I tricked you.
Yeah. You don't win this game. Like that's the other thing. It's like you're not gonna get all the answers right. He's gonna be like, okay, you
got
guys
me.
can live. You really know your horror trivia. You pass. Like, nah, he's a psychopath. He's going to murder you anyway.
Yeah. So then, like, I remember watching the scene, like, when she goes to the patio and you see Steve, like, just completely disemboweled.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember being like, whoa, because it was just so graphic to see, like, his innards just spilled out.
Pretty crazy.
It was wild. So she's running outside, so trying to figure out a way to get out, because it's basically the next question was, like, which door am I at?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like trying to guess, and then he throws something through the door. She runs outside, and it's very 90s.
You know, by the time you see the end of the movie, you see why he asked that question, because he was probably at both doors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But at the time, I think about this scene. I think about the fact that she was like making popcorn over the stove.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never seen that done before, and I was like, "What is she doing? Like, why is the popcorn on the stove?"
Yeah, I don't know. They probably stopped selling it after this movie came out.
I was like, "Why is it not in a microwave?" That confused me.
It's very strange.
Yeah,
It was like a foil skillet.
Yes.
With like a big piece of foil over it, where the popcorn was supposed to basically bubble it to the top, and then once it's fully popped, you just turn the stove off.
I assume so. And then, of course, very 90s. She got the cordless phone.
Oh yeah, baby.
This big bulky thing, and she's talking to him, and then she gets outside and she's running away. And so now you gotta think about this. The first time you're watching this, you know, it's in the 90s, Drew Barrymore. She's on the poster for the movie.
She's the only one on the poster. It's literally just her face.
So I'm like, oh, this is where she's gonna get away. Like he kills her boyfriend. She's gonna get away. Her parents are coming up the driveway. We see their headlights. She's going to get away. And then, like, as she's about to run, like, he comes from behind and he stabs her. And we're like, wait, what? This should not be happening. And as we all know now, she does not get away. They murder her. And my jaw just hit the floor because I could not believe that the star had been murdered.
On the rewatch or the first time?
Just shut up.
Did the jaw hit the floor both times? Like, what? I still can't believe this. This is crazy.
No. Not the second time.
Wes Craven, wow.
But it's just, I just went back to like my old self watching it, my old young teen self watching it, and saying like, I remember being so shocked because it was like, how could they kill her so soon in the first scene? And she's the star of the movie. Insane.
You know what's funny is like, this movie came out in 96. In my head, I remember being older when it came out. Like in my head, I watched this when I was in like high school. But in 1996, I was only 10.
Yeah.
So, I don't remember watching this movie when I was that young.
So, I know I didn't see it in the theater. I definitely saw it a Blockbuster rental.
Yeah, Blockbuster. That's probably true. I probably didn't watch it till like 1999.
But still.
I was 13. I'm old enough.
You're old enough, but it still was like, this is shocking.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, this is, I mean, the guts, the blood.
Would not recommend a 10-year-old to watch this movie. Although, speaking with 10-year-olds,
I'm sure they've seen worse.
I've spoken to 10-year-olds that are like horror fanatics.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, wait, you watched that movie? Like, yeah, that movie's awesome. I'm like, oh, all right, man, you got it. I guess if they're not getting nightmares, then it's all good.
I mean, my first horror movie, I was pretty young. Let's tell the story now. I was young, and so it was actually with Dad. It was the original Psycho. I was in bed sleeping.
Well, if you're gonna introduce your kid to a horror movie, it might as well be a classic.
I had been like asking him to watch something, and Mom, of course, was like, "No, she's too young." And one night, it came on,
and it ruined you clearly.
One night,
and that's why you're a sicko now. It's Dad's fault.
No, Dad, I love you. I thank you every day.
Yeah, right.
So one night, like I believe it was like late at night because I was in bed, and like Dad came home and was like, "Oh, like wake up," because back then, of course, I mean, like there's no DVR, there's no like, it's on or you miss it. And he's like, "Oh, like come on, this movie on," and I was like, "Oh, a horror movie?" And I got out of bed, and Mom was asleep. She didn't know, and we went outside to the living room, and Psycho was on. My first like real classic horror movie, and I remember like the whole like Norman Bates of it all. It's like I couldn't understand in my little child brain why he wanted to act like his mom or why he thought he was his mom.
He hadn't read Freud yet.
And and like the whole split personality thing just really got into my head. Like I was like, this is so weird and so scary that I remember that taking showers after the shower scene where he murders, I would like put soap on one half of my face and
so you could look out the other eye.
I would close one eye
make sure
and watch that face.
That Norman wasn't coming.
Yes, because I was scared. And then I would close the other eye and watch the other side of my face. Like,
that's
for
amazing.
Weeks.
That's amazing.
And so eventually I was like, you can close both eyes. Nothing's going to happen to you. And like the first time I did it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm about to get stabbed.
That's
nothing
exactly
happened.
what happens is when you let your guard down.
Yeah. So all I have to say, like from a very young age, I was like, oh, horror. Once I got over my fear of taking showers, I was in. So thanks, Dad.
Well, all right.
I don't know how we got there.
We're talking about being too young to watch horror movies, and you just provided some pretty clear evidence that maybe 10-year-olds shouldn't be watching horror movies.
But anyway, so the first thing happens, she dies. We're all like, oh, this is crazy because now who's the star of this movie?
Which is actually, I feel like, a really central part of this movie. Like, my girlfriend hates horror movies. I told her I was watching this for the pod. She's like, I'm not watching Scream with you. I'm like, it's not that bad. It's actually kind of like, I feel like this movie, the first scene is probably the goriest in terms of like being a slasher film.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the rest of the movie, I feel like, is primarily a murder mystery. Like it's more so about like who is the killer.
And what is their motive?
And you're going back and forth between all these multiple suspects that they're fingering, and then there's Billy, who seems like he's the obvious choice, but maybe he's not. And how did he call her when he's in jail?
And where's her dad?
Where's her dad? Her dad's been missing. He's supposed to be on a business trip, but he's not at the hotel that he always stays at. And there's just a lot of questions about who the killer might be. And then you have what's my man's name who works at the Jamie Kennedy's character?
Yeah. What is that man's name? Randy.
Yeah.
Oh, he's the guy who has all the rules.
So Randy works, of course, at a movie rental place. He watches movies religiously, and he knows all the rules. So he's basically like, I feel like in a lot of times when you watch movies, like the main character's best friend is usually like the voice of reason.
Yeah.
And so he kind of serves that role in terms of like, he's the narration of what you're watching.
Exactly.
And that's kind of the purpose that Randy serves in the film, is like he's kind of telling you like, this is why we're doing this, because we're making a prototypical horror movie. And you're watching a horror movie, but it's really a tutorial.
It's genius.
Yeah.
It's great. Even when he's like, you kind of think Billy Loomis is kind of the killer, because there's a scene where...
Because he's creepy as hell.
Well, yes. But...
That's why.
He is creepy. But basically there's a scene where Neve Campbell's character is in her house, and the killer comes into her home, essentially, and tries to kill her. And she runs... It's funny because she makes, like, on the phone with the killer, she's talking... And she's saying something about like, oh, I hate horror movies because they would have these busty blondes who run upstairs when they should be running out the front door instead. And of course, when the killer comes to her house, she tries to go out the front door, but she can't, and ends up running up the stairs. And so as she's in there, she locks her door and she gets away from the killer. But then out of nowhere, her boyfriend Billy appears in the window, and a cell phone drops, which of course is mad sus because like, why do you have a cell phone?
Yeah, it's
And why are you here
1996.
so fast?
It's 1996 and you're 16 years old. Why do you have a cell phone? And I've never seen you with a cell phone before.
Right.
And you're my boyfriend.
She's
So,
like, I think you're the killer. Which actually leads to a really good scare because as she's running away from Billy and she goes down the stairs, opens the front door, the mask appears. It's only because
Dewey.
Deputy Dewey's holding it up in front of the door like a dummy. I don't know why he's doing that.
He's just standing with it.
standing there with the mask.
How are we supposed to feel about Dewey? Are we supposed to sympathize with him? Are we supposed to
God.
like him?
So
I had a hard time even
I-
coming to terms with how I felt about his
I
character.
felt bad about him when it came to the way his sister treated him.
Like, God, his
because it's
sister
like
treated him like
he's
trash.
at work and she's like, "Come on, deputy dummy, we got to go home." And it's like, "Come on, I'm at work and this is my superior. At janitor's your superior." It's like she just was really getting into him, and I felt like, oh, he's just trying to, he's trying to make it.
Yeah, he's trying to
make
start
it.
his career. He's trying
Yeah.
to be an adult.
But she's like not here for it at all.
No.
But then also it's like, bro, like you're kind of cringe. He's kind of a dummy. He's bumbling around.
Yeah, he was the bumbling police officer that I think that's the role he's supposed to fulfill is like, the cops in these movies are always a bit incompetent and the person who saves the day is never a police officer.
No,
So, yeah, that's kind of just the purpose that he serves,
he was fine. I mean,
which is, the whole thing with him and Gail is kind of like I don't really care either. Like, am I supposed to?
I didn't care about
Am
that.
I supposed to enjoy this or not? And then I think even Gail's character, who Courtney Cox plays, is like, how am I supposed to feel about this woman? I think when she's first introduced, I mean, how did you feel about
Well,
Gail?
okay, so initially you're sympathizing with Sydney's character, right? Because it's like her mom was raped and murdered.
Right, we didn't. Yeah, that's the context.
We caught the guy, or at least we think we caught the guy who did it. He's in jail. And Gail comes out and writes this book where she's basically questioning everything. And what exactly, does Sydney know? She was so young. Can we even rely on her eyewitness testimony? And so, from Sydney's point of view, it's like here comes Gail stirring up trouble, questioning her, and also dredging up this history of her mom who was brutally murdered. So I get feeling like you're trash, get out of here. But on the flip side of it is like if Cotton Weaver didn't actually kill her, then it's good that Gail is digging this up and asking questions because who wants an innocent person in jail? So I can see both sides of it. I mean, of course, we all know that at the end of the day, Gail doesn't really care who did it.
No.
She just wants the viewers and the ratings and the book sales. But if her greed or her thirst for book sales ends up getting an innocent man out of prison, then I say, cheers to her.
Yeah, I feel like that was the initial sense when Gail's first introduced. It's kind of like, oh, like she's a representation of just like the grubby news media who doesn't care about how their work affects the lives of the people
Yeah.
that they're covering. Like she doesn't care about the fact that this girl is a high schooler whose mom was brutally murdered
Yeah.
and had to go through this whole trial. She's just showing back up and pretending like it's all good because she doesn't have any personal connection to what's happening. For her, it's just ratings and book sales.
Yeah.
And I think the way that she, obviously by the end, she ends up saving Sydney's life. And so then they are then able to create a bond. Of course, that's after her cameraman gets murdered. She's under attack herself.
Oh,
And then it's
God.
like, all right, you wanted to be close to the business? Like now you're in it.
Oh, she got the scoop, all right. She got the,
Like now you're a part of the story.
yeah.
Which
She loved. She was
is-
happy.
Yeah, I mean, she loved after she was alive.
Yeah.
But like, if she had got murdered, she would have been like, "Damn, I should have left this story alone."
All right. So
I'm also like looking at the guy who played Cotton, who was supposed to be the dude that was blamed for her mother's murder, who it turns out didn't actually kill anybody, and they showed him very briefly on the screen.
I believe in
like-
the second movie he comes.
I'm like, that dude looks mad familiar.
Yeah.
So I just looked up the second movie on IMDb to see if he's in it. And he is in it. And it's Liev Schreiber. So I was like, oh, I do know this guy. I just couldn't remember his name. But he's famous for... Oh, he's Ray Donovan. That's what he's famous for. But that didn't come till much later.
Oh,
Yeah, so
wow.
that's the
I
guy
didn't
who plays
even-
Ray Donovan. Yeah, so that's why I'm like, they showed
I
him
didn't even
very
realize that.
briefly, but the fact is, like, he basically had a cameo in this first movie
Yeah.
with no lines, and then he gets like a main role in the second movie,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, good
And
for
who
him.
knows, like that might have jumpstarted his career. So
So let's talk about some of these deaths and how ridiculous they were.
So before we do that, I also wanted to just note that one of the things that stood out to me about that opening scene, which is obviously just like a great way to start the movie, but I was like, yo, Drew Barrymore's acting is really bad. Like, it was awful. I was like, man, like, and you know, like the threshold for acting in a horror movie is already, you know, the bar is pretty low anyway. You're not expecting Oscar-winning performances. But I feel like she was like much worse than everybody else in the movie, and which is ironic because she's like the biggest star in the movie at the time.
Well, so here's the thing about that. So I went back up and looked up like her screenplays and whatnot. So, but prior to this, she was in E.T. as a child,
Right.
and she was in another movie called Firestarter, which was based on a Stephen King book as a child. But as an adult, her next biggest movies, like she had Ever After and Wedding Singer,
Never Been Kissed.
were in '98.
Oh.
Never Been Kissed was in '99.
Oh, so they
So
came
she
after
wasn't even
this.
really a big star. She was a child star technically, but she wasn't really a big star until after this movie. But for some reason, in my memory, I thought she was like the thing back then.
Well, those years all kind of blend together after a while. I mean, like I said, I thought Scream came out in like 1999. I didn't realize it was as early as '96. And like, you know, we were young at that time either. I remember Neve Campbell being a thing in Scream and because of Party of Five.
Yes.
But I didn't watch Party of Five, so I really associated her with this movie more than that TV show. And Drew Barrymore was just around a lot in the 90s and the early 2000s. So in my head, she was the biggest star coming into this film as well,
Same.
but maybe she wasn't.
She
I mean,
wasn't.
the biggest star in this is probably Courtney Cox because she was on Friends.
That's
right?
true.
But like the movie's not really about her. And Henry Winkler is obviously
Well,
the Fonz. So, yeah, I mean, they did a good job with this cast, I thought. Just, yeah. Drew Barrymore was just not convincing at all. It was, oh my God, you're gonna, oh. Even when Steve was dying, it was just like the fake
scream?
cry was
Yeah,
just
you
like
didn't
really
like- you
bad.
weren't-
It's
you
like,
weren't
come
here
on,
for the
bro.
scream?
And then the other thing when Steve's dying is like, he's like, oh, you got that question wrong. Turn the light back off. And she's like, ah.
Okay.
And Steve's literally there like,
No.
And then she turns it off anyway. What do you think is going to happen? He's obviously going to kill your
Yeah,
boyfriend.
but I think her keeping the light on, what's the difference? He's still gonna kill him. He was wearing a mask. Like,
Yeah, but
the
she
light
didn't even
didn't
see him
really-
yet. She didn't know that they had a mask on. She didn't know anything. She just saw Steve tied
yeah,
up.
but I don't think her leaving the light on.
No,
or
it
off
wouldn't have made a difference. Steve was
difference.
still going to die, but I just feel like that didn't, like, it didn't make any sense. Like, anyway. So, yeah.
Murders.
I mean, obviously, the thing about movies like this where there's like who did it, who's the killer, and you don't really know till the end. What's fun about rewatching the movie is that when you know the answer, then you can kind of like see all the little
Yep.
nuggets that they drop throughout the film that you wouldn't have noticed on your first watch, but then it's like, oh, that's why they did this. That's why he kind of gave him that face. That's why they did.
Yeah.
That's why they always show up a little bit afterwards. And why are they always on the scene? And
Well,
so,
it's also like why they killed her, right? Because
exactly, yeah.
initially you're like, oh, some dumb girl Casey and her boyfriend got murdered from a high school. Why? And we find out later on when all the teens are talking that what's his name, Stu.
Matthew Lillard's
Yeah,
character.
Stu used to date Casey, and apparently Casey dumped him for Steve. And so there's this whole conversation where what's the movie guy?
Randy.
Randy basically says to him, like, how do you know you didn't kill her? I'm like, you used to date Casey, didn't you? And then she broke up with you for Steve. And then his girlfriend's like, wait, I thought you dumped Casey for me. And he's like, I did.
Yeah.
And it's like, come on, bro. That's
You
not
did
what
not, bro.
happened. That's not what happened. You were mad and you killed both of them.
The other thing about Randy being the voice of reason is that Randy has Billy pegged from the beginning.
Yes.
Like the entire movie, he's like, Billy's the murderer. I don't trust this guy. He's mad creepy. and he's basically voicing what the audience thinks, or at least what the writers want the audience
Yeah.
to think. Because the more Randy says it, the more you're like,
Yeah,
this guy is
creepy.
actually mad creepy.
But he even also at one point says, you're absolutely right. It could also be me. Like, I'm the guy who's like big into horror movies. I work at the video store. Like, I'd be like a really good suspect as
But
well.
you don't actually believe it's Randy.
No, but he's also like, he's just questioning it to be like, just to put it out there. Like, yeah, this could also be a theory, but look at Billy.
Yeah.
This guy is shady. But of course, we had that whole phone call to Sidney while Billy is locked up. So it's like, how could it have been him when he was in jail? And that's how he gets out.
Of course, is explained away by Stu.
Yes.
Or actually, I think what Sidney discovers, or what she posits towards the end of the film, is that this is, of course, after she has sex with Billy. She's like, oh, by the way, after I lost my virginity to you, I wonder if you're the killer still. And she's like, what would be interesting is if, who did you call when you got arrested?
Yeah, right.
Oh, maybe your one phone call was to me to throw me off the scent.
He's like, after all that, you still think it's me?
He's like, what? You still think it's me? And she's like, no, I'm not saying it's you, but like, what if you tried to murder me and then I give you my virginity? Like, what if?
That was very bizarre.
It was so bizarre.
Because I was like, why are you asking this now?
Yeah, and then also her losing her virginity to him was just like so stupid anyway, because it was just like, this guy sucks and he's mad creepy and he's always like sneaking into your house, and he's clearly like preying upon the fact that you are in the midst of this traumatic experience.
Oh my God. Can we please talk about the fact that after he gets out of jail, they're at the high school and he's like, first of all, the first time we meet him, he's complaining to her about having like a PG relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I want to be hot and heavy.
I feel we were headed towards NC-17. I'm trying to skeet here, man. It's my name.
And then she's like, will you settle for a PG-13? And he's like, what's that? And then she like flashes him her boobs. And he's like, oh, you're such a tease, right? So already I'm kind of like, all right. And then
that sucks.
And then after he gets arrested for trying to murder her and he gets let out at the school, he's basically like accosting her and he's like all upset. He's like, before your mom died, you used to put your hands on me, but now ever since it happened, it's been a year already and you still won't touch me.
It's been a year. Come on, get over it.
And she's like, my mom, and he's like, I mean, my mom left our family and I'm over it. And it's like, your mom left. My mom was raped and murdered. It's not the same thing. And he's like, come on, you're going to make me suffer? And I'm just kind of like, this guy is a jerk. Like,
well, now we know why.
So all this happens and you're still like, all right, like, you might as well I think you might have tried to kill me, but let's just have sex anyway and see what happens. But thinking about the virginity thing, like, I know we're not on quotes yet, but it just really made me laugh was after towards the end when she finds out, like, who the killers actually are, and Stu looks at her, and she's like, oh, no, like, you lost your virginity to him.
Total abandonment causes serious deviant behavior. Certainly fucked you up. It made you have sex with a psychopath.
That's right. You gave it up. Now you're no longer a virgin. That virgin. Now you gotta die. Those are the rules.
I was dying laughing because it was like, yeah, like, you're a dummy.
Yeah. He's like, you know the rules. You can't have sex in these movies. You have sex, you die. It's like, oh, damn, she's about to die.
Do you want to talk about these rules?
Yeah, let's talk about the rules. So that was one of the rules that Randy talked about. Never have sex. The virgin lives. Anybody who has sex in the movie always dies. What was the movie where a couple's having sex is that Nightmare on Elm Street?
Oh, yeah.
And there's like the blood that travels up to the ceiling. That was a sex scene that turned into a murder scene.
Also, a lot of those movies had sex scenes at the beginning where people died. A lot of those 80s horror movies. Like Friday the 13th. During the camp scene, a lot of the camp counselors were hooking up, and they ended up being murdered by, we know now, Jason's mother. Another
rule is never say, I'll be back.
Never, because, you shouldn't say that, because speaking of, the girlfriend's character, Tatum, who played Cindy's best friend, she goes to get the beer. She didn't say, I'll be back explicitly, but she goes to get the beer out of the garage. And
why did she go get the beer?
Because Stu asked her to go get it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was another thing I was like,
I caught that.
Oh, like Stu's like, hey, babe, can you get me another beer? And then the other thing about Stu.
But why do you want to kill her? I don't understand the motive for that.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I'm thinking thinking maybe it was just to get Sidney alone because if we recall, Sidney was staying at Tatum's house because her dad was away.
That's right.
So I think maybe it was like, in order for us to kill Sidney tonight, we got to get Tatum up out of here because Tatum's not going to leave Sidney. So I think it was kind of a means to an end.
And she showed up the first time they tried to kill her.
Correct.
So then it's like, oh, if we get rid of her best friend.
Yeah.
The other thing about it, I mean, there's a few things. Again, it's a horror movie. There's going to be things that don't really make any sense. I think one of the things, and this just bothers me about teen movies in general, is when there's this guy that's like clearly a jerk. And I think we talked about this for some other movie.
It
that
happens
we were
in all of
reviewing.
them.
And there's like the high school girl.
It was Jumanji.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. Jumanji. And for some reason, they always have a girlfriend that's like super nice and sweet. And then you're always like, why is she with this guy? Like, I feel like Stu is completely insensitive the entire movie. This girl's best friend almost got murdered. Her best friend's mother did get murdered.
Yeah.
They're dealing with people in their high school that got killed. Their principal just got killed. All this stuff is going on, and he's just like making jokes about it the entire time.
But the jokes were so funny. If we're like, watching it from a viewer's point of view, they were pretty funny.
But it just felt like this couple is clearly a bad match. Like, why is she with this guy? He's such a jerk.
And he's not even hot. Like,
no,
he's not a Skeet Ulrich.
No, he's not.
Like,
he's not giving.
He's not brooding. He
wasn't brooding. He was goofing. He was goofing.
So like that whole scene to me is just hilarious because first of all, you're in a garage. You know how many weapons are in there? And like she gets the beer bottle, which was cool, and she's throwing the beer bottle, she's smashing it against him, she's fighting back. But I'm like, I feel like there's other things in the garage she could have grabbed to fight herself. But she decides, oh, I'm gonna try to fit my body through that little like pet door.
Oh, for the cat.
Yeah. I'm like, this makes no sense. How's a human body going to fit through a cat door?
She was very skinny.
No. You could get past your shoulders. There's bones there. You can't. You're not a rat. You can't bend your bones
Or a cat.
To get through that. So like the whole time she's like her head's hanging out and I'm like, this is ridiculous. And he's just like, all right, like you're a dummy and now you're stuck.
He's like, well, that was easy.
That was really, really ridiculous.
Oh, this was the other thing I was gonna say that also didn't make any sense is there's a rash of murders happening in this small little mountain town in California. They all seem to be related to students of this particular high school. And then they basically like cancel school indefinitely because
it's not safe.
Now it's not safe, and there was a murder that occurred at the school. So then they're like, all right, like everybody's on curfew, like it's not safe. And they're like, oh, school's canceled. Let's throw a party.
With the killer that's probably going to be there, yeah.
It's like, what?
It's
like,
kids.
Hey, come on, Sid, it'll be fun. It's like, you're going to be there, right?
Where's
He's
his
like,
parents?
Okay.
Where's Stu's parents?
I have no idea.
We never see the parents.
No.
The only parent that exists is Dewey and his sister's mom, and Sid's dad, who's been away. There's no other parents.
Yeah, do Stu's parents even know what's going on? They may have just left him for an indefinite amount of time. Maybe they're like, I don't know, backpacking in Asia or something.
It's just so bizarre.
He obviously doesn't really have a lot of supervision
at all.
And neither does Billy, which is why they're just running around murdering people.
Right.
Like, nobody's really checking on them.
Okay. Well, I guess that works.
But yeah, the whole idea of like, somebody came to my house and almost murdered me. Let me go to this house party. Like,
well, maybe she was thinking like it's just safety in numbers.
I'll be safer.
You know,
yeah.
I wouldn't be by myself like that. Although I probably would just stay at Dewey's house. He's a cop.
Also,
like that's where I would be staying because like she got a phone call there, but no one ever actually came to Dewey's house.
I would also be worried about like even just being out on the road because then at some point after this party's over, I'm gonna have to leave. Yeah, and then it's like I'm gonna be out at midnight.
But you're going to Tatum's house. I think she still was staying at Dewey's house. So in her mind, it's like I'm staying with my friend. Like I'll be fine.
Yeah, I just thought the house party idea was a really bad one, and in like really poor taste as well. Like, why are we partying right now?
Yeah, and but then Dewey shows up with Gail.
Oh,
and that,
God.
again in poor taste. Why is she here?
Exactly.
He's like, Dewey.
I'm a really big fan of your show.
Right. Dummies.
Everybody was so excited.
Oh, how about when she's at school and those two girls are talking about her in the bathroom?
Mm-hmm.
And basically they're saying like, I don't think this guy even tried to kill her. I think she wants attention. It's like, you know, my mom got murdered And now she's like, suicide is so last year. So no, it's teen suicide is so last year. So instead, like, let's pretend that someone's trying to murder me. It's like, okay. But I can see people
That's
saying
realistic.
that. Yeah. Absolutely saying, like, she's making it all up. She wants attention. She's a whore just like her mom. And I feel bad for Sid because she had no idea her mom was sleeping around.
Yo.
She thought they were all rumors.
Her mom was out here. Her mom was out in these streets. Which ends up being the motivation for the murder, which Billy admits at the end. Because that's the whole piece of, like, what's the motive? And again, they're narrating your way through this entire movie. So they're like, we know what you're thinking. We're going to say it. We're going to say, you're probably wondering what's my motive. And so he ends up saying that he's mad. He was mad at Sidney's mom because Sidney's mom was sleeping with his dad, which is why his mom left them.
Yeah.
Which is why he murdered Sidney's mom a year ago.
He raped her, bruh.
Oh, that's right.
She was raped and murdered.
That's right. I forgot about that part.
Ugh.
Yeah, that's pretty bad. And this is who she lost her virginity to.
Yes.
The man that raped and murdered her mother.
God.
So
she's gonna need therapy after
that's
this.
why she's like screwed up for the next 7 films.
Yeah.
Because that's how high school started.
God.
And then as she becomes an adult, then she continues to be...
Your brain's already messed up.
She continues to be chased and attempted at being murdered for the rest of her life, basically. So yeah, like, that was basically his motivation. And then when they're asking Stu, like, well, what's your motivation? He's like, peer pressure?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like, what were your thoughts on Stu? Like, why do you think he went along with it with Billy?
I think he was just a sicko. I think, like, him and Billy were clearly friends.
They were besties.
They, again, didn't seem to have any sort of, like, parental supervision. Billy's mom left, but apparently he still lives with his dad because his dad does show up when he gets arrested.
Right.
His
that's
dad
right. We do see his
appears to
dad.
be maybe he's a
Like
lawyer
Yeah,
as well.
he seemed very like
He came off in like a lawyerly type of way, but that could also be indicative of him being like
having money,
the working man who's never at home.
Yeah.
And Stu clearly doesn't have any sort of parental figures.
Well, we do hear about his parents when when Sid gets him on the phone, like towards the end after he's been stabbed like 1,000 times, and she's like, "It's over for you, like that's it." And he's like, "My mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me."
Yeah, right. I'm really bleeding out here, man. You cut me too deep.
I felt bad for him.
Nah, I didn't feel bad for him. He was a jerk. I hated him.
It was
Stu sucked. I hated Stu. I hated Stu so much.
Gonna kill me. I heard some of that line was actually an ad lib, and they kept it in because they thought it was so funny.
Yeah, nah, Stu was killing me the whole movie. I'm just like, yo, this guy
He was
sucks.
hilarious.
Like he's the exact type of guy in high school that I would have hated.
But he was so funny.
Oh God.
I'm literally choking.
Nah,
he was so
Stu
funny
was
to
so
me.
trash,
he
bro.
was so again watching it as a viewer, he was funny.
Yeah, he
Obviously,
was.
in real life, you would not like this guy.
Nah, you definitely
but
would not.
He
You
was
definitely
really
would not.
funny to me.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it was like that's my man's, and I think it was basically just like him trying to hold down his friend, and also he seemed to be getting like a rush out of it.
Oh yeah, but see, I think he was closer to Billy than Billy was to him, in the sense that I think at the end of the day, Billy would have let him die and take the rap for it if he could have, because the way they were stabbing each other, like you said before, it was very like almost like superficial. Like, okay, get enough to show that I was fighting and something happened, but like he was stabbing Stu like you're about to die.
He killed him.
Well, no.
Oh no, he's
The
technically
TV on the head
Sidney
killed him. But I mean, I think at the end of the day,
Death by TV. Get it? But yeah, he definitely.
But I think Billy would have let him like rot.
Yeah, he was definitely more attached to Billy than Billy was to him. And even when they were supposed to like pretend that this is like that they attempted to fight the killer, and the killer's really they're trying to frame her dad the same way that they framed this other guy, Cotton. Even after they both stabbed each other, then Billy's like, "Give me the knife again."
Yeah.
Like, what are you talking about,
like, bro?
Like, that's not a part of the plan. He's like, come on, man, it's gonna be good. It's like, no, it's not gonna be good, bro. Like, you already stabbed me
He was trying
twice.
to kill him. He was trying to kill him.
But like, yeah, why though? Like, cause he's like, this is the thing. They're both sickos. it wasn't like he was gonna turn on Billy.
No, he wasn't.
He would have probably tried to keep it going. They would have tried to keep murdering more people, because at this point, I think Billy definitely was operating out of some sense of revenge. Whereas I feel like Stu just had like a sick sense of pleasure.
But I think that's the reason, though, because as far as Billy is concerned, he wants to kill her and be done with it. I don't think Billy had like a long list of people he wanted to kill. I think it was like, I killed your mom, haha, it's big. I'm gonna kill you, kill your father. Like, it's done. So it's like, at this point, I don't really need Stu around. And Stu's gonna want to keep killing, which I'm not sure I really want to do. So I think it was kind of just like closing out the chapter. Like,
no, that makes sense actually.
This is it. Michael Jackson.
Oh, so you said the murders. So all the different, and there's probably 6 people that die.
Yeah, so you had the Casey and Steve, which we already discussed. We had the girlfriend through the garage door.
Mm-hmm.
You had the principal.
Principal Fonz.
Again, what was that murder about?
Well, I think, there was no real motivation to murder him. I think that may have been just a part of the writing to throw us off in terms of potential motive.
A red herring, if you will.
A red herring, because right before he gets murdered, he had basically just expelled 2 students for running down the hallway wearing this stupid costume that was, what was it called? Father Death.
It's so insensitive.
It's a Father Death Halloween costume. So they're running down the hallway. Mind you, the woman who, the student who almost got killed is back in school. So they're running right past her after she just had a brush with death. And they're like, so then the principal basically expels them for being idiots. And so, like, the potential, they could have been the murderers.
The murderers, yeah. They're
and
getting
then it's
back
like they're
at him.
getting back at the principal for expelling them.
Yeah.
But we actually never see those kids again.
No.
And so there really is no tie to them.
So speaking of that scene with the principal where he gets murdered, or before he gets murdered, there's a part where, like, the principal keeps hearing things, like someone's in the school, he's not quite sure where, and he opens the door. He's like, little shits. And he opens the door, and it's like Frank the janitor, but he's dressed like Freddy Krueger.
So that was actually one of my favorite quotes. Because he's dressed exactly like Freddy Krueger. And then when the principal sees him, he's like, who is that? And then the janitor looks up and he goes, oh, not you, Fred. Yeah. I'm like, oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just
that
giving
was great.
you more.
The nods.
So then Gail's cameraman gets murdered.
Oh, yeah. He gets his throat slit.
Yeah, and then he throws him on the top of the van.
And the blood comes down. I like that effect. The blood coming down the windshield.
With the windshield wipers.
Yeah, that was nice.
That was pretty dope. And then that's it, right?
There weren't that many.
It was only 4 people that died. I mean, only 4 people.
Apart from them. Yeah.
But
because,
they
kidnapped the father pretty early. He never even reached the hotel.
Yeah.
Wow. Ooh, that makes sense. Because think about it. The night when the dad comes in, like, I heard a sound, I heard a scream, and that's when Billy has stuck into her window. He said, all right, I'm leaving out. I'll be gone, blah, blah, blah. So Billy probably climbed out the window and kidnapped the father at that same time. I'm just not realizing this.
Or Stu kidnapped him while he was upstairs talking to Sidney.
Yeah.
But either way, the dad was supposed to leave that night or the next morning?
I mean, either way, he basically was telling her goodbye. He was like, yeah, I'm about to go.
Yeah,
so maybe it was like early in the morning he was leaving or later that night, but she hadn't seen him since that scene.
Yeah, and then they took his car and like abandoned it somewhere.
Right.
To make it look
like he's the killer.
He killed, yeah, exactly.
These kids are...
They're diabolical.
Yeah.
Any other, like, favorite quotes?
Oh, man, I feel like I kind of jumped ahead and used so many of them already, but... Oh, I definitely have some. Hold on. So, going back to the first scene, when she's on the phone, Drew Barrymore's on the phone with the killers, and she's like, what do you want? And he's like, to see what your insides look like.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, he's like really going for it. Probably my favorite of all quotes. You're going to know what it is because I say it all the time.
Yeah.
So,
you do say it all the time.
So basically, this is like after Casey is killed in the first scene, and all the kids are hanging out and they're talking about what's been going on. And Randy's like, oh my God, they found her liver in the mailbox next to her spleen and her pancreas, which is crazy to think that someone
they
does
gutted
this.
this girl and hung her up on a tree by her neck. Like, that's insane.
Incredibly fast though, because the parents came into the house, they see the smoke, they turn off the popcorn, they're running around, Casey, where are you? They hear her on the phone taking her last breath, essentially. The phone line cuts. The husband says, take the car, go to the Mackenzies and call the police. And as the mom runs outside, she sees her daughter hanging. So like they killed her and hung her very quickly. But yeah, they basically gutted her. And so Randy says they found her liver in the mailbox next to her spleen and her pancreas. And then, of course, Sidney's getting upset because, like, bruh, like, this is the same killer who killed my mom, probably. This is crazy. And then Stu's like,
She's getting mad, right? Better leave her alone. Leave her alone.
and it's so corny, but it's still, like, to this day, I still say that. It's just one of those lines. Classic Scream.
Yeah.
And it's, you know.
Oh my God, you're such a jerk, but I love you.
Let's make out.
Another funny part to me was when Sidney was talking about like how first this happened to her mom and now somebody's chasing after her, and she's talking with her best friend about how like this is gonna be how people remember her.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll make a movie after your life.
Oh yeah.
And she's like, well, my luck, it'll be Tori Spelling. I was like, oh my God, like that was just. How did Tori Spelling just catch a stray? Like that's crazy. Like they just did that.
Well,
like that was wild.
You want to know something funny about that? So, in the second movie, Scream 2. So, in the Scream movies, what they end up doing is they have these movies called Stab. So, in every Scream movie, there's like a Stab movie that goes before it. So, in Scream 2, you're watching Stab. In Scream 3, you're watching Stab 2. Okay.
So basically, it's like. We're going to continue to be meta over the course of the series.
Correct.
So when she says they're going to make a movie about me, then in Scream 2, they actually do make a movie about her.
So the movie is called Stab in Scream 2. And of course, in Stab, Tori Spelling plays her character.
Perfect.
So, and like the more you watch more of the movies, they do a lot of that where it's like the script from the prior movie will apply something in like the second or the third movie. So they do that. It's just great. But yeah, I definitely caught that and was like, whoa. I think she wanted our girl from Who's Got Mail. She wanted
Meg Ryan.
She wanted Meg Ryan, and they were like, yeah, no, my luck, I'll get Tori Spelling.
Yeah.
And she did get Tori Spelling in Scream 2. So that was funny.
There's also a part where Gail and Dewey are talking, and Gail is all excited because she's like, yo, what if this is the same person that killed Sidney's mom? Like, we'll have a real serial killer on our hands. And Dewey's like, well, it's not serial killer technically. In order to be a serial killer, you probably have to kill a few more people. And she's like, well, we can help with that. It's like, yo, this woman is a sicko.
Yeah, that was.
She's trying to get these ratings. But that line actually made me laugh out loud.
Yeah, that was a good line. There's also a line. Guys, I love scene 1 because I keep going back to it. In scene 1 where...
What's your favorite scary movie?
Well, that's just a classic line. But basically, Drew Barrymore hears like a knock at the door and she's like, who is it? Who's there? And the guy on the phone's like, never say who's there. He's basically like, don't you watch any scary movies? That's a death wish. It's like, you might as well come outside to investigate a strange noise or something. And it's like, that's essentially what she would do because she's, the typical woman in a horror
And that's
movie.
actually what Sidney does when they show up at her house. She goes out on the front porch and starts digging
puts
her nose.
finger in her nose. What am I doing now? Huh? You can't see me.
And he's like, all right.
Time to die.
He's like, yeah, all right. Now I'm going to stab you.
Oh man, this movie is just so much fun.
Well, we also didn't talk about the very end when, of course, they reveal themselves as the murderers. They had pretended to stab Billy earlier, but when she goes upstairs to find him, he's not actually stabbed. He has a bunch of fake blood on his shirt, which is corn syrup, the same thing they used in Carrie for the pig's blood. Like just over the top with the movie references, just like hitting you every scene. So then at the end, they end up doing this whole thing where they're supposed to stab each other and then kill the dad, but they get interrupted somehow. I don't even remember what happened. Somebody shows up or somehow they don't end up killing the dad.
I think Sidney ends up taking the knife.
Oh, the gun.
The gun was
the
there.
gun is missing, and they're like, "Where's the gun?"
And then she got their voice thing, and she calls them, and she's like trying to be funny.
Yeah, she basically tries to like do it back to them what they did to her, and she gets them to split up, which is when Matthew Lillard is already bleeding out at this point.
Yeah.
He tries to catch her. She stops him, throws a TV on his head, which for some reason explodes. Into sparks. I don't think that actually is what happens when you drop a television,
you need that
but
effect.
It does in movies. And then Billy is isolated, and she like pops out the closet wearing the killer's uniform.
Yeah.
And knocks Billy down, and then Billy wrestles her, and he's about to stab her, and then out of nowhere, Gail Weathers comes out the front door with the gun, and they didn't kill Gail, which was also stupid too, because they had knocked her out earlier and threw her body on top of Dewey's on the front porch. The assumption is that Dewey's dead because he got stabbed in the back, but he doesn't actually die.
Yeah.
Gail doesn't die either. She just got punched. Well, she got punched by Sidney. That was earlier in the film.
Well, yeah.
So yeah, then she kills him, and then they're like, "Oh, she shot him. This is just the part of the movie where you think the killer's dead." And then he jumps back up for one last jump scare, and then as soon as they say that,
he's like, "Oh!"
He jumps back up, and then it's like, "Bang!" Shoot him in the head.
Him. Yeah.
It's like, he's actually dead.
I love that. It was.
How'd you feel about Gail being the one that ends up rescuing Sidney?
Again, like I said, like she may not be the most likable character, but at the end of the day, as long as she's doing what she needs to do to help Sidney, I'm cool with it. Like if she ends up getting caught out of jail and he didn't actually kill anybody, then I'm good with it. So I mean, and again, you gotta think like characters have layers. You know, she's not all good or all bad. So you know, she may be self-serving and out to get this money, but at the end of the day, like she still ends up saving Sidney. So I'm like, okay, who else was gonna do it? I mean, Dewey was hurt. Dewey was too hurt to do it.
Yeah.
Randy also survives.
Randy does survive. Randy gets shot in the shoulder.
And her dad is still tied up, so he couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So it had to be Gail.
I also get the sense that Gail and Dewey's relationship is also meant to, and again, I only watched the first 3 movies, and I really don't even remember the second and third, but the sense that I got, at least at the end of the first movie, is that, like, if this relationship continues, Dewey will probably be able to kind of soften Gail's edges a little bit and give her a little bit more of an empathetic side. And at the same time, Gail can kind of help toughen Dewey up and give him a little bit more of a real life perspective, because it seems like he's still kind of living in Pleasantville.
Oh, God. Oh, talk about a movie.
Yeah, talk about a 90s movie.
Oh, God.
Yeah, we might have to add that one to the list.
Was that Tobey Maguire and
Tobey Maguire and
what's her name?
that girl from that one movie, Bring It On?
What?
Was she in Bring It On? No? Pleasantville.
All right, I have to look this up because now this is driving me crazy.
Well, while you're looking that up,
I'm gonna look it up.
I also wanted to ask if there's anything in this movie that, again, is from 1996 that maybe doesn't age as well in 2024. The only thing that I thought about was when, right before Billy and Sidney have sex for the first time, and Billy's in her room basically talking to her about how she wasn't dealing well with her mother's death, and basically like uses that as a ploy to get in her pants.
Yeah.
And I feel like the whole idea of like this boyfriend mansplaining to Sidney how she's supposed to be dealing with grief, and then her being like, you know what, that you're right, and then sleeping with him is just like, I don't know if that part of it. I mean, obviously, by the end of the movie, it's proven that this is a bad move.
Yeah.
But I feel like you saw stuff like that in movies a lot more, of just like a guy explaining to a woman how she should feel, and then her feeling guilty about her own feelings, and then kind of succumbing to the guy. I feel like you don't see that as much in films nowadays. Obviously, this is a plot point in the movie, so it isn't necessarily painted in a way where Billy's the good guy. But that whole scene was very cringe.
I agree, and I actually thought of the same thing. But I kind of liked how they, while that's going on, the boys, I guess the guys downstairs are watching another movie, and they're like, oh, like, not because probably her top comes off or something. It's like, oh, and then it
When she gonna
flashback-
show her tits,
Yeah.
man?
They're actually watching Halloween, which again, another nod to a horror movie. Because again, like this is not taking place during Halloween. It's just
Taking
a regular
place
time.
in the midst of all of their classmates.
yeah,
getting
and they're
murdered.
watching a murder. Which think about it is like very bizarre. It's like why are we watching?
Why are they having a house party?
Okay, yes, the party, and the party is actually pretty lame because they're just watching Halloween.
They're
Like
just
that's
drinking beers.
that's not really a house
It's supposed
party.
to be a small gathering.
kinda like a
It ends up being
kickback.
like 15 people.
It's kind of like a kickback, but
yeah.
not really a house party. But either way, yeah, they're watching this movie, and I'm watching it last night, and I'm thinking to myself, wait, it's not even Halloween. Like, why are they watching? Why are they just sitting around watching Halloween? And then they find out that their principal has been stabbed, and they're like, "Yo, Principal Finkler." I think his name was like Principal Finkel or something.
That's funny.
The Principal Finkel's been murdered, and they're like, "Yeah, they hung his body from the flagpole." Like, "Yeah, let's go take him down." Yeah, and I'm like, "Why?"
and Randy's like, come on, guys. Seriously?
And they all like stumble out of the house and run into their cars to go pull down their dead principal's
Yeah,
body.
that's crazy.
I was like, these kids are dark.
Well, as we wrap up this
Oh wait,
episode-
sorry. Going back to thoughts before about Pleasantville, it was Tobey Maguire and Reese Witherspoon.
It was Reese Witherspoon.
And the movie I
really?
was thinking about was Cruel Intentions, and I couldn't get it out. Yeah,
I thought it was somebody else in that,
that was
movie.
Reese Witherspoon. Nope,
Huh.
that was her. One of the greats.
What about themes? What would you say is the theme of Scream?
Good Lord.
I had a hard time with this too.
I had a really difficult time because it's like, who do you place the blame on? It's like, I mean, on the one hand, I think therapy, this needs to be sponsored by therapy because
Sponsored by therapy.
BetterHelp, one of these things, because I feel like at the end of the day, it all came down to him feeling like he had to blame Sidney's mom for his dad's affair. Is your dad not responsible at all for his actions?
Well, no, but of course it's always the woman's fault when somebody has an affair.
So that's me. I kind of was like,
you read Lessons in Chemistry.
like
you know how this works.
I'm like, I did. That book was amazing, by the way. But I'm thinking like you and your dad seem to be fine, and your dad's the one who chose to smash someone else. So why is it that it's Sydney's mom's fault, and Sydney must also die just because I don't even know why she must die as well. Her dad must die as well. But your dad can just go on living his happy life. I didn't quite understand.
Well, she must die because she's not giving up the draws.
Oh. But then but the whole plan was, so I'm gonna go upstairs, we're actually gonna have sex, and then I'm gonna kill her.
Yeah.
So that didn't
yeah.
really, I was like,
It did feel like he just was spiraling out of control and just wanted the entire family dead. I mean, that's really what it was. Because he had already killed the mom a year ago and got
Yeah.
away with it. And then was just like, nah, I want more.
yeah.
And like basically created this fake relationship as a ploy to get close to Sydney just so he could kill her. I mean, you get the sense that this was like a long con that
Oh,
he had
absolutely.
been building on for the past year. Because why else would he murder her mom and then start
And then
building
wait
a
a year
relationship
later.
with her?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
this was all done so that he could get to the 1 year anniversary and then kill her
And
too.
then kill her.
And
And
there's
Stu was-
also a part of the movie where like towards the end where he doesn't know where she went and she goes missing and he's like, oh, they escaped and where's the gun? And he's looking for her and he gets pissed and then he just like starts breaking stuff. Then he takes the knife and just starts like ripping up all the pillows
Yeah,
on the couch.
yeah. Like, he's
Just like,
crazy.
Oh, like this is okay. So he's
He's
actually
unhinged.
just a lunatic.
Well, that's why I said this needs to be sponsored by therapy because, I mean, how do you deal with? I mean, maybe if I'm stretching, it's like no, because I can't blame the parents for this because like you're not gonna suspect like me having an affair is gonna cause my son to murder.
No, it's definitely
Like,
not the parents' fault.
It's like he clearly needs help. Something's wrong with him, and his best friend.
Yeah.
I mean, Stu is a whole other thing because he has no real motive here. He just wants to murder people.
yeah, Stu just thinks this is fun.
I mean, I kind of want to deviate. Well, not really deviate, but you know how I always give you facts about the movie.
Mhm.
I think I can kind of put this in here, and maybe this might help with. So, this movie actually was inspired by the real life killings of 8 people in Gainesville, Florida, in 1990. 5 of which were college students.
Gainesville, of course, is where University of Florida is.
Yeah. So the killer, they called him the Gainesville Ripper. he basically he's murdered 8 people, and then he was also known to spy on women in their own homes. He
Another
was
true creep.
Yeah, he was sentenced to death, and he was put to death by lethal injection in October of 2006. Now, a month before this happened, so this is this happened, then the movie happened, right? Now, in 2006 of September, a month before Ron was actually put to death, 2 16-year-old students ended up stabbing their classmate to death in Idaho. They bragged about it on camera after they claimed to be inspired by the movie Scream, called the Scream Killings. They were aspiring serial killers. Yes,
That's insane.
aspiring serial killers. They had a death list, and they basically only got to the first murder because they were dummies. I don't want to get into what happened, but they got found out. The cops were able to actually find the tape that they made because they tried to burn it, but it didn't burn correctly. It was a whole thing. So they're only 16, but they ended up being tried as adults, and they were given life in prison without parole. So
that's usually the way it works when you want to be a serial killer. That's what you're either going to get the death sentence or you're going to get life in prison.
So yeah, so the Scream Killings is the whole thing.
I mean, I feel like that's something that oftentimes gets brought up whenever these serial killer documentaries and these series, they get super popular. I know there was this big boom a year or two ago where you were just seeing Jeffrey Dahmer and all these different TV shows and documentaries, and people were saying is this glorifying these awful people, and is this potentially going to make people feel like this is a way to become popular? Which I think in the warped mind of people who do become serial killers, oftentimes that is a big part of their motivation. Even the people that go and do school shootings, they're like, oh, this is going to be my way of getting my manifesto out to the world, and then I'm going to kill myself anyway. So it's really just a way for me to live on in infamy as opposed to never being paid attention to at all.
Right.
At least it'll be a way for people to recognize me. I mean, when I think about the theme of this movie, I think, number one, it's a horror movie. So, these are probably movies that typically don't have much of a theme at all. It's just intended to scare people. But again, I come back to the point that I made at the beginning, which is to me, this movie is all about the whole idea of being meta and how can we explain and appreciate horror movies within a horror movie of itself? And so when I think through that lens, I think for me, the theme that comes to mind is if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I feel like
That's
they recognize that horror movies have a template.
Yep.
And they're yes, there's a template, but it works. And we're going to prove to you that it works because we're going to use it.
And
we're
tell you we're
going to
using it.
explicitly tell you that we're using it and show you how we're using it and still make a great movie.
But they still put that twist on it by having the double killers.
Yes.
Because I'd never seen that before.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, 2 killers? That's why he's so fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Nah, yeah. This is the whole thing. It's this was really an homage. But then it's but we're also gonna update it and make it edgy and
make it funny
and they're gonna upgrade it and make it it's like a horror movie for people who don't love horror movies, because it's kind of it's giving you a way to kind of ease into the genre without it being oh, you never
so
seen horror
scary.
movies before? Watch Carrie. All right, dog. Relax. Maybe give me something else first so that I can kind of get comfortable with how this works. So I feel like that's kind of the purpose of it. And so I think
I'm just smiling. I'm just sitting here smiling because in my head I'm yo, we just talked about a horror movie and true crime in the same podcast.
No.
What could be better?
It's your dream come true.
What could be better?
It's your dream come true. You figured out a way to get me to talk about horror and true crime. So I guess we can start with you since this was your pick. And again, on every episode we give our rating of 1 to 5 rewinds, 1 being don't ever watch this movie again, 5 being that it has endless replay value. How many rewinds would you give to Scream?
I'm gonna give it 4.
Okay.
I know you thought I might get 5 because I love horror, but I'm gonna say 4 only because
I didn't think you were gonna give it 5. But yeah, 4 is solid.
I'm gonna give it a 4 because again, it's like Scream is one of those horror movies that I can come back to and still enjoy it. Like Matthew Lillard still makes me laugh every time I watch this movie, and I think for me, it's a big part is the nostalgia of it. Like the first time I watched this movie, I remember just being like, "This is wild. This is shocking." They flipped the script, and the killers were amusing. They were funny. So it wasn't a straight up horror movie clutching the sheets. It was like very comical. Again, I don't think you should be watching this with your kids. I don't think this is one of those movies. Again, like you're your own person.
Yeah,
so if you're
do what you want.
if you think your kids are ready to watch it, then by all means, sit down, pop some popcorn, and do a family film. But
In the microwave.
yes, not over the stove. I mean, that's just
Stovetop
ridiculous.
popcorn.
Yeah, we're not doing that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot of fun. I think that like even just like the goriness of it, like it just captivating. I don't know. I really enjoy it. But then towards the end of the movie, I found myself just kind of being like, all right, like I kind of wanted to fast forward like past like the end part because I was like, all the fun stuff is kind of over. Like the jokes were kind of done. Like it was just kind of like wrapping it up. Like, okay, I know who the killers are. I knew where it was going. So I was like, I enjoyed the.
Yeah, but they still don't kill them until like the last 5 minutes.
I know, but I
There's
feel like,
not a lot of.
but I feel like for me, like I enjoyed like the first half more than the last half. I don't know why. I think I
Because it's still the mystery
leading
of
up.
it.
Yeah, the leading up to it,
Yeah.
I was like, oh, this is really like interesting. And then towards the end, I was kind of like, all right, here comes Billy and Stu. They're gonna do their little song and dance, and then they're gonna die. So I was kind of like, okay. And the whole Gail and Dewey thing, I was like, I don't care
didn't have
anything
anything
about
for it?
them. Yeah, I don't care about those characters at all. So like all of those things that are together, I'm just like, I don't really want to watch this. So yeah, it's fun, entertaining, but it's not like the best thing out there. There are better horror movies for sure, which maybe we'll explore at some other time.
All right.
But the next pick will be Joel's.
The
It will
next
not
pick
be
will
horror.
mine. I mean, I feel like a 3 is too low. I feel like I don't know if I'm at a 4.
Okay.
So I might give it a 3.5 out of 5.
Okay, that's solid.
3.5 rewinds.
That's
I mean, I
solid.
think my overall opinion of this movie is positive.
Mhm.
Again, horror is not my favorite genre, but I do feel like it gives you more than just like a bunch of kids in the woods getting slashed to death. Like it's not that. And I feel like that gives me a little bit more replay value of like, okay, yeah, I would actually want to watch this movie again because it has a little bit more nuance. It has, like Andrene said, a little bit more humor. The characters aren't necessarily great. I think my favorite character in the whole movie is honestly Randy.
Oh
Just
yeah,
because
he's good.
like, hey, don't you dummies see what's going on here? Like, and I always love that character.
Yeah.
So yeah, Randy was probably my favorite, but he's such a bit part that I didn't necessarily feel super attached. For Sydney, you kind of just feel bad for her because her
Yeah.
life sucks. And she's just super depressed, and she has this manipulative boyfriend, and her best friend gets killed. Her mother was raped and murdered,
God.
and so it's just like, yeah, there's really nothing positive happening for Sydney. So you feel bad for her more than you like
Aw.
feel yourself attached to her, or at least that was my
Poor
perspective.
Sid.
Definitely poor Sid. But yeah, I mean, it's a good movie. It's definitely worth a few rewatches, and it's like, yeah, I think when I think about my rewind rating, I always think about like if I was channel surfing and I
It came
saw
on.
this movie on, would I stop? And like, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd stop. Yeah, Scream's worth watching at least till the commercial break, or I might even watch for a little bit longer. And even watching the movie last night, I think it was like hour and 50 minutes, close to 2 hours.
Oh wow, it's that long?
And like when it ended, I was like, oh, it's over already. Like
Wow.
I was like, I was in it. Like I was having fun watching it, and I feel like it went by really quickly. So yeah, I could be convinced of a 4, but I'm gonna go for 3.5 just to be conservative.
Okay. That's a good rating. Solid. Makes sense to me.
If you have thoughts on Scream or any of the other films that we have reviewed thus far, this might be your first episode, and if so, we'd encourage you to go back and listen to some of our older ones. But we can also be reached on social media on both Instagram and on Twitter, or I guess X as they're calling it now.
Oh,
I think we all still, everybody,
It's
the streets
Twitter.
are still gonna call it Twitter forever.
It's Twitter.
But we can be reached at RR90s Pod. RR90s Pod is the at. And then you can also send us emails if you prefer that over social media. And Andrene, what's the email address?
Rewatch 1990s at gmail.com.
So yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. And what we've been doing is kind of alternating. Andrene will pick a movie, I'll pick a movie. But you know, if listeners have suggestions for movies that we should cover, then we'd love to hear that
Let us
as
know.
well. And then maybe we can start covering some picks from you guys.
Sounds good.
Anything else on Scream? That was awful. On that note, let's wrap it up before she screams into the microphone again. Oh, God.
Later.